Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel KnitTales. In today's episode, I'm knitting a cozy sock for my daughter while I indulge in an enchanting Victorian tale. So grab your knitting needles or just a cup of tea and let's dive into the world of crafting and storytelling together. Whispers in the fog. Isabella sighed as she put the finishing touches on the elegant gown in front of her, the fine silk and intricate beading gliding smoothly beneath her skilled fingers. As she held it up to admire her work in the dim glow of the gas lamps, she imagined the admiring glances its wearer would attract at the upcoming winter ball. For a moment, she allowed her mind to wander, picturing herself sweeping into the magnificent ballroom, the layers of sumptuous fabric rustling as she danced in the arms of a handsome stranger. But the fantasy faded as quickly as it came, the faint shouts of street vendors outside drawing her back to the cramped confines of the dress shop. This was where she belonged, not the glittering world of the London elite. Isabella bent intently over the gown in front of her, stitching intricate floral embroidery along the bodice seams. She was so lost in her work that the tinkling bell over the shop door made her prick her finger. Wincing, she looked up from the dress form to see a gentleman entering, removing his hat to shake raindrops from the brim. He was tall with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, and his greatcoat and leather boots suggested substantial means. But it was his eyes that made her catch her breath, a striking blue-green that reflected the stormy afternoon light. Those eyes met hers, and Isabella felt a jolt run through her, a fluttering in her belly that she did not recognize. "Good afternoon, sir," she managed despite the curious sensation. "How might I assist you today?" The gentleman approached the counter, never breaking his intense gaze. "Good day. I'm here to place a gown order for my mother, Lady Eleanor Cartwright. We will be attending the Huntingdon's winter ball." Isabella's nerves vanished as her professional instincts took over. The winter ball was the event of the season. "Of course, Lady Cartwright has excellent taste. I should be happy to craft something suited for such a grand occasion." She came around the counter, quickly taking his measurements and discussing styles and fabrics. As she worked, his mesmerized stare never once left her face. She found herself stealing glances as well, distracted by his handsome features and tick of brushing back a wayward curl. Their hands accidentally touched and the jolt surged once more, hearts quickening. At last, the order was complete. Isabella curtsied politely and asked for the family's direction to send the invoice. It was only then the gentleman introduced himself. "Pardon my poor manners. I am Edward Cartwright, Lady Eleanor's son." He bowed gracefully. "Might I know your name as well, Miss—" "Spencer," she supplied, another unbidden thrill passing through her. "Isabella Spencer. Very pleased to make your acquaintance, Mr. Cartwright." "The pleasure is entirely mine." The warmth in his words was unmistakable. As he turned to leave, Isabella knew she had made more than just a new client that day. Something had sparked between them, a promise of possibilities that both frightened and excited her. As Mr. Cartwright cast a lingering look over his shoulder, Isabella felt certain he sensed it too. Their fates had just become entwined for better or worse. Over the next few weeks, Edward returned to the shop repeatedly under the pretense of fittings or placing orders. With each visit, he inched closer to confessing his growing affection for Isabella. In turn, she felt her longing for a life beyond the confines of the shop, blossoming into love for this man who saw her as more than just a seamstress. After the dress shop closed, Edward led Isabella into the foggy streets in plain cloaks, unseen. He revealed the city from new eyes, away from her life as a seamstress. They strolled misty riverside paths, smelling rain mingling with the Thames breeze. Edward pointed out landmarks barely visible through the gossamer fog, the splendid Tower Bridge in the distance, St. Paul's Dome over the rooftops. He told colourful tales of executions at Tower Hill, extravagant royal parades along the Strand, clandestine lovers in pleasure gardens. His vivid depictions made the city bloom around them. They meandered through stately parks she had only glimpsed before, now quiet and still. As leaves eddied around their feet, Edward recited stirring passages of plays and verse. Captivated, Isabella joined in, their voices fusing lyrically under the boughs. He led her through hidden alleys to secreted neighborhood squares behind imposing townhouses. There, Edward gestured passionately, debating reforming society while she confessed her yearning to transform her own confined life. His eyes shone as he avowed to help her achieve all that she desired. And in the early morning hours, sneaking back to the dress shop, Edward would pause to steal fervent kisses until Isabella felt dizzy with overwhelming elation. Indeed, the city harbored them, a refuge where ardent hopes could take flight, unfettered by conventions of the past. In their private world, social positions evaporated. The daytime constraints fell away, leaving only Edward and Isabella exploring each other's minds and hearts. They strolled the Thames banks discussing poetry. They lingered in neighborhood squares debating ideas. The foggy city was their refuge, where passions reign over background, but their desire for more set in. Lingering glances turned to tender touches, turned to passionate embraces. Their innocent friendship deepened into intimacy. But intimacy bred recklessness. Edward began openly visiting the shop, no longer content with hidden rendezvous. Gossip soon burned through parlors. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Lady Eleanor's fury descended upon the modest dress shop. Isabella looked up from hemming a gown to see the stately woman filling the doorway, outrage smoldering in her eyes. "You wretched girl," Lady Eleanor seethed, casting her gaze about the cramped workroom in repulsion. "Did you really think your schemes could ensnare my son without retaliation?" Isabella's pulse raced as she set down her needle. I don't know what you mean, Mom." "Oh, I think you know very well." Lady Eleanor stepped further into the shop, her nose wrinkling at the pungent smell of dyes and dusty fabrics. "A little bird has told me of your scandalous outings with my Edward, gallivanting around the city at all hours, utterly soiling our family's good name." Isabella paled, her heart dropping into her stomach. Somehow their secret rendezvous had been uncovered. "We meant no harm," she pleaded. "It's just we share a profound connection, and—" "Connection? Do not make me laugh, girl," Lady Eleanor scoffed. "You are a common seamstress, a peasant, and my son is the scion of one of London's noble families. Whatever spell you have cast over him, I demand you release him at once." "I have cast no spell, Ma'am," Isabella replied, humiliation burning her cheeks. "Only opened my heart. Surely that is no crime, even in one of my station." Lady Eleanor slammed her silk reticule down on the work table, making Isabella jump. "You play a dangerous game, Miss Spencer. This dalliance ends today, or you will quickly find yourself out on the street." The threat hung venomously in the air between them. Isabella's dreams were crumbling before her over a lover Lady Eleanor deemed unacceptable. At last she found her voice. "I cannot force your son's affections any more than you can, Lady Eleanor, but I will caution you. Any attempts to deny his heart may lose you his favor forever." Lady Eleanor scoffed. "You know nothing of a mother's role, girl. I know what is best. Stay away from my son, or you will regret it." In a bustle of silk skirts, she turned and quit the shop, leaving the bitter threat lingering. Isabella sank into her chair, hot tears spilling down her cheeks at the injustice. Would she and Edward be forever doomed by their disparate places in London society? Only time would tell if their love could survive Lady Eleanor's wrathful intervention. After Lady Eleanor forbid him from seeing Isabella, Edward spent agonizing, sleepless nights pacing his chambers. His heart ached constantly without her in his days and nights. He tried to lose himself in writing, but couldn't compose anything worthy. Isabella had been his muse. Without her, inspiration vanished. As Edward replayed his mother's cruel accusations against Isabella, his remorse deepened. He understood Lady Eleanor wanting to protect their status, but now grasped how deeply her prejudice had wounded his beloved Isabella. Recalling Isabella's pained eyes during that wretched confrontation carved out a hollow in Edward's soul, her refusing his letters and turning him away when he desperately came searching, compounded his torment. Isabella too now felt a void, the light fading from her world without Edward's warm companionship. She sought refuge in her sewing, taking meager solace in crafting gowns by rote memory. But the splendid dresses reminded her painfully of sharing glimpses of that glittering life with him, however briefly, before having those vivid dreams ripped away. Mostly, her heart now mirrored the tattered scraps of fabric she surrounded herself with, frayed and delicate, denied its other half that had so profoundly completed hair. She forced herself to refuse his letters, to turn him away at her door, terrified reopening that profound soul connection would only end in fresh anguish. The bleak London winter reflected their mutual desolation, Edward endlessly pacing while Isabella numbly sewed, both lamenting the rupture of bonds that had felt so true, so destined. Yet one ember persisted in each spirit, the power of their love defying all efforts to extinguish it. They clung to the belief that this love could overcome the ruthless forces intent on keeping them apart, if only they could persist until society's conventions bent before the strength of their passion. Edward could bear their separation no longer. Despite his mother's stern warnings, he threw on his coat and ventured out into the dreary London night, his feet carrying him instinctively to Isabella's cramped boarding room. The cold bit through his thin gloves as he rapped urgently on her door. When Isabella opened it, surprise and anguish flooded her face. "Edward," she breathed. "Forgive my intrusion," he rushed, "but I could endure our distance no more." Isabella's eyes glistened. "This changes nothing. Your mother—" "Damn what my mother thinks," Edward burst out. Isabella jumped. Regaining composure, he continued fervently, "None of it matters without you, my love." He dropped to one knee on the worn wooden floor, grasping for her hand as tears escaped down her cheeks. "I should have done this long ago," Edward vowed. "Dearest Isabella, make me the happiest man in London. Marry me, I beg of you." "You would defy your family, your status," she implored in disbelief. His eyes burned with resolution. "Gladly. Their approval means nothing compared to my life with you." From his coat he produced a simple gold band glinting in the firelight, a ring once belonging to his grandmother. Taking Isabella's trembling hand, he slid it onto her finger, the vow ringing silently between them. Overwhelmed, A cry caught in Isabella's throat. At last she found her voice again. "Yes, my love." In an instant she was in his arms. As Edward spun her around the little room, joy and laughter filled the space that had hosted only sorrow for so long. No matter their uncertain future, in this perfect moment, finally together again, neither held any doubt. Their rightful place was here, eternally in each other's arms, come what may. And that wraps up today's episode of KnitTales. I hope you enjoyed knitting along with me and were as captivated by the twists and turns of Whispers in the Fog as I was. If you enjoyed today's mix of crafting and storytelling, please don't forget to hit that like button. It really supports the channel. Also, if you haven't already, consider subscribing for more knitting adventures and enchanting stories. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps this community growing. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What did you think about the story? And what are you currently knitting? Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you so much for joining me today on KnitTales. Keep those needles clicking, and until next time, happy knitting and happy listening.